The lighting's a bit better this way. And a film I saw recently, I saw this over the weekend, I think on Saturday, was Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. To give a kind of perspective of my relationship with the Charlie Chaplin's films, I've only really seen three of his other films. I've seen City Lights, which is one of my favorite films of all time. I've seen that a couple of times. I've seen the sound version of The Gold Rush, which I wish I saw the silent version. I thought something was kind of lacking with that one. And I saw Limelight, which is one of his later films towards the end of his career. It's a sound film, and it has like a cameo by Buster Keaton, and it's pretty fantastic. Let's see, where am I? Okay, so Modern Times, I saw it in this theater here, surrounded by a lot of families, and it kind of brought me back to the sense of just being a child in theater, with the purest expression of comedy. I think what is very fascinating about Modern Times, or just about Charlie Chaplin in particular, is that physical comedy transcends language. The film has some sound, I think, but I think it's silent, but there's some music and some sound effects, I think, but physical comedy transcends language and transcends borders, really, where you don't really kind of need what is so fascinating about it is that there is no intermediary between what is on the screen and the audience, and so in that sense it's very pure, where there is no real way to misinterpret anything. The comedy comes from, like, the opening scene is like there is a conveyor belt of sorts. I'm not sure if Lucy LeBlanc might have had this skit in one of her things in her TV show, but in Modern Times it's a conveyor belt, and the comedy comes from him like just looking very funny while he's trying to tighten the screws on these things that are moving on the conveyor belt. He's like tightening the screws, tightening, and the thing goes faster and faster, and he's kind of so hilarious to watch. And if you actually watch carefully, he actually is kind of tightening the screws. And a lot of the comedy, for example, one of my favorite parts of the film, of course, everyone knows about the kind of clockwork sequence where he kind of goes in the thing and it goes, it kind of spins around. But one of my favorite sequences is when he is, I forgot the context, but they were in, I think he was working as a night manager for night guard for a department store, and he's like bringing his I guess girlfriend of sorts inside so she has a place to sleep, and he starts playing around with the roller skates, and he starts skating around, and for some reason, I don't know, it's just because it's funny, I guess, he goes, well, maybe I'll let me roller skate blindfolded, and he puts the blindfold around, and he skates around the floor, which kind of at the end of which has like this drop off, like a hole in between, like it's like they're on, let's say, the third or fourth floor, and there's like this is where they are. He's like skating around, and at the end here, if he goes over, he's gonna fall off and die, or fall off to the ground floor and get injured. And who's blind, he's like legitimately blindfolded, and he's kind of like skating around, always just like teetering at the edge and able to kind of go back, and it's such a physical feat, and where to some degree the comedy comes from being in awe of like, how is he doing this? How is he? Is that real? Is that It's like a being in a kind of a circus and watching a circus performer do tricks. That kind of entertainment is it transcends all boundaries, all kind of artificially constructed boundaries. It reminds me of, I think Buster Keaton is the same. He's very physical in his comedy. I am a big fan of The General, and he does these stunts of some sorts on like these moving trains, which are it's just amazing to watch. And he does these bits of comedy where things are falling down and he manages to kind of evade the things that are falling on him. It reminds me of the films of Jackie Chan. There's a great video by, I forgot the name of the guy, but he does all those the great video essays. But there's one about Jackie Chan and his use of comedy in his action scenes, and you can see how incredible it is as well. Like when I was a kid, I used to grow up on Jackie Chan films, and he'd do these stunts where he would be jumping from moving car to moving car to helicopter to train to he'd be, you know, hanging off the edge of a bus, and if you're familiar with familiar with his films, usually at the end of the movie, there'd be like a behind the scenes reel of showing that all of the stunts he's doing is very much real, or at least like they are 100% actually dangerous. So it's quite it's to some degree, you know, just being in awe of the physicality of comedy and action adds another level of entertainment to a film that usually right now we don't really get as much from, partly because, you know, we were trying to have people safe, but, you know, when you watch an Avengers movie, no one's really, you know, shooting lightning at anyone, no one's really in danger, but part of the comedy, part of what makes this film, Modern Times, for example, fun is there really seems to be some level of danger that is, it's like you're laughing out of just nervousness and amazement at the same time. It's pretty fantastic, and the film has a very strong kind of heart in the core. And what I found very fascinating about it is that it came out in 1936. And right before the Second World War, and there is so much reference to, in some ways the film is very dystopic because it looks at this kind of futuristic world where everyone is obsessed with, maybe it was the president at the time, but everyone is obsessed with work as an ends as opposed to a means. I don't know if Chaplin was reading Marx at the time, but this whole slave wage thing, this whole slave labor, it's a very strong undercurrent to that film, and there's a lot of comedy that comes with it as well, especially near the start of the film. You have this kind of, the boss is trying to push, or someone's trying to sell the factory where Chaplin is working at a tool to improve the efficiency of the workers. It's like this machine where they use the employee kind of sits in the machine, and the thing feeds them for them so that they will eat faster and they will eat more efficiently, and the more efficient they eat, obviously the faster they can go back to working. So, you know, a lot of comedy comes from that. It's also amazing just the thought that they kind of had to build all these weird contraptions for the film, but you know, the film's about this guy who is pretty much an awful worker, and how throughout the film he gets into these very unfortunate situations that, you know, put him in jail a couple of times, and eventually he meets someone who perhaps gives him a reason to not remain in jail for all this time. It's a fantastic and funny film, and moving, and, you know, I wish I could just see more Charlie Chaplin films, and I really should see more silent films in general, but I haven't really given myself the opportunity to, you know, see them. But, you know, Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times, 1936. If you haven't seen any Chaplin, I would highly recommend City Lights. That's my favorite one. But, you know, all his films are great. And when you're done with, you know, his silent films, it'll be more rewarding to see Limelight, because he kind of plays himself in some way, and he plays like this guy who is passe, who is at the end of his, who is pretty much retired at the end of his career, and he's trying to kind of revitalize it by starring in a play, which is kind of the same thing that Charlie Chaplin was doing, because his career was falling off, and he wanted to, I guess, you know, have one last hurrah. And I think Limelight is also quite underrated. But yeah, Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times, pretty good. I highly recommend watching it.